The following discussion is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered any kind of financial advice. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Universe Jump Pod, where we talk about all kinds of things Web3 and video game related. And what better way to kick off the year than with my guest today? He is Chris Huey. He is the co-founder of Super Jump Games. They are creating the Web3 game Eon Guardians. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, great to be here. That was an amazing radio voice that you just put on. I've never heard you use that before. That's awesome.
Well, you don't get that. Chris and I worked briefly together at SkateX at Block Tackle, and so you didn't get to hear the dulcet tones of my voice over Slack, is basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, not so much in like work conference meetings.
So let's just begin real easy. Tell me about Eon Guardian. Well, you can tell me like however you want to do it, right? Super Jump is the studio behind Eon Guardians. You've got a mint coming up on Monday, January 9th. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, why you created Super Jump and what you're trying to do with Eon Guardians.
Yeah, I guess we'll start from the beginning. Why we created Super Jump. Me and my co-founder, we both come from a pretty deep background in free-to-play games, mobile games, but free-to-play kind of being I was around in free-to-play back in I don't know if you remember Pogo.com.
Yeah,
it's pretty old reference these days, that's basically
quick fun fact that I'm going to interrupt you with. One of my early clients doing PR stuff was with the Total Entertainment Network, which was acquired by Pogo, because Pogo was an EA thing, right? Way back in the day.
Yep.
Anyway,
so
you were back then.
Yeah, so back in the Web 1.0 days,
yeah,
of free to play, and that's kind of how long I've been around in free to play, and really, I'm also a pretty hardcore gamer myself, and there's kind of a disconnect at times between free to play game design, how we have to design games in free to play in the Web 2 traditional sphere, versus what I enjoy personally as a gamer. Right, and it can be sometimes hard economically to make those two things meet, because the nature of free to play, kind of sustainable business, is you really have to be kind of value extractive of your customers, right? That's the whole. When you really boil it down, that is the whole business of free to play, and that's how you make a sustainable game studio, from a financial perspective, right? But what we saw with Web3, excuse me, what we saw in Web3 is an opportunity from a technological perspective, to really kind of experiment and try to pursue a different business model, right? There's things that you can do with blockchain, from royalties on trade and marketplace. These are all pretty standard concepts by now. But there's an opportunity there that doesn't really exist in Web 2 games, to be able to try to pursue a different business model that really includes the customers, or the gamers, the players, right? That really engages them and kind of includes them in the ecosystem from a top-down perspective, right? Where they're participating in some form of revenue also, and there's that symbiotic relationship between kind of growing the ecosystem together, right? So that's kind of the fundamental ethos, I guess, of Super Jump Games. I like to say, I come from somewhat of an esports background, is you hear this a lot when people kind of win dominantly in esports, like, oh, he's built different, or she's built different. And that's kind of our like one phrase, like maxim behind, within the team. It's like, we're Super Jump Games, we want to build different. And that's kind of our ethos.
Yeah, I think, it kind of, I think back to that South Park episode where they talked about free to play games, right? And how you have to make the game just fun enough, right? Like, it wasn't about extracting maximum entertainment value.
Yep.
It's like you said, it was a balance between making it just fun enough for people to keep going, but at a point to where they'll want to pay to keep going. And so taking that into consideration, what are you doing, differently? Like, what are you offering through blockchain that allows you to sort of reinvent or build differently your game from the ground up?
Yeah. So, and some of this is, in in Web 3 terms, alpha, I guess. But we really want to kind of play with or experiment and pursue the idea of user-generated content in a way that kind of utilizes procedural royalty attribution, right? So kind of what that means is right now in Web 2, like we're talking about, what is your path to profitability as a game studio? It's primary sales. That's like pretty much 99.9% of a revenue stream is you just have to make primary sales. So everything in game design, like you said, you make it, like it's not even like a desire from the game designer. Like this is just the economic model of free-to-play games for optimal revenue is you make the game fun enough, and then you create really deep economic systems to, for lack of a better way to say it, you paywall them, right? And that was free-to-play game. This is what people often criticize about free-to-play game design, is that eventually, inevitably, you will hit a paywall that is difficult to grind past, and thus you are incentivized to start paying, right? And that creates your revenue stream. So what we're trying to kind of put forward in Eon Guardians is a different way to do. Obviously, we're still going to do primary sales. We still want to create great content. We still want to sell that great content to our players. But we want to create kind of a platform and an opportunity for players to do that within themselves, and also thinking about like where we are as a culture right now. You know, this is the creator generation. This is the creator economy generation, right? Everyone's a content creator. This is not some like snide boomer looking down on Gen Z thing. Like that's just that's where we're at. You know, we're doing a podcast right now. This is not a thing that we would have done in I don't know, like when I got started in the industry. This is not a thing that I even would have seen from a game studio, right? We're in the content creation generation, and that, to me, that's a great thing. That's the democratization of marketing in a sense. And so we want to kind of acknowledge that with the game design and the business model of Eon Guardians. We want to find ways that for a simple example, let's say you're a Twitch streamer, you're an influencer, you have your own audience, and you are highly engaged, at the top level of playing Eon Guardians or whatever the game may be, right? But for our example, it's Eon Guardians. And let's say, we have, an armor piece or some, legendary axe, and you want to brand it, right? You want to be able to rope your audience in and be more engaged, but also, from your end as a influencer and a content creator, naturally you want to monetize your audience just like any other business. And we want to give people a way to do that in game, because right now they have to do all of it out of game.
Yeah.
Right. Right now they have to just sell their own merch. They have to do their own advertising. They have to find partnership, sponsor deals, and that's the life of a streamer. But what if you could actually kind of weaponize, I don't know how to say that in a nicer term, but like kind of, like engage and activate your audience to actually start making, representing your brand in game, right? And you can get a revenue stream through that. And then because it's blockchain, because we're able to do procedural royalties and things like that, us as the developer, it's a symbiotic kind of synergy thing where the more our players succeed, the more we succeed. And similar thing for them, the more Eon Guardian succeeds and becomes a premier esport or a premier streaming game, the more successful they are, because it's more eyes. And it's just, we want to try to find this cycle that is direct and not indirect, right? Because right now it's all indirect for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting actually coming from the Universe, right? Where our whole thing is we create this franchise and then give it away so people can take the assets and make whatever they want with it, right? And that's, as I talk about that, typically that's sort of like an outward thing, if I think about it in sort of the abstract, right? Like, here are the things, you go make your own story, make a comic, make a lunchbox, keep all the money, right? Like all of that, right? And what you're saying is kind of, it's not the inverse of that, but it's almost taking that, at least the way you've described it right now, is taking that inward, right? Like, it's so oh, okay, so you can create your brand and drop it into the game, and then that's how so you can pick up a whatever, a Chris Hui axe, branded axe, right? And it'll look really cool. It probably won't have a different power set than another axe, a similar axe out there, right? But it will carry your branding, and fans of you can then go out and be like, oh, I want to get that, right?
Exactly. And kind of what we're talking about with free to play games and like having to always do primary sales, and that's a very value extractive things for customers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is like that's just how free to play games, the economics of free to play games works. That's not going away. That's just revenue stream, right? But how do you make that less at odds, right? How do you make that a thing that customers and players want to do, and it is not a thing that we are trying to extract or trick them into, or you know kind of guide. There's a lot of like psychological premise, design premise behind a lot of free to play and like addictive purchase design, and
Yeah.
this is why loot boxes are becoming a legal gray area. How do you make that so that it's good for players too, right? Where it's not, I have to shell out my monthly, whale money to whatever, this game company to stay competitive. And it's like, no, I watch this streamer every day of the week for, hours on end. I have dinner and watch the streamer every day. I want to support them, and I like this game. There's just aligns everyone together, to where everyone feels good about what they've done, right? Like, you're spending money, and I want to spend this money because I know that I'm both supporting this creator that I love, and I'm
Yeah.
supporting this game that I'm getting a lot of fun out of.
Well, I think it just reflects kind of the time we're at, right? Like, to your point, everyone's a creator, and that's great, right? Because before,
It
people
is.
just didn't have the tools or the channels. People out there, and it's not even just the streamers like you're talking about, right? Like, one of the tenets of what we're building here as well, I think we're just in alignment, which is why I keep bringing it up. I don't mean to keep log rolling for my company, right? But just the idea that there are thousands and millions of creative people around the world who, this is kind of a platform for them to kind of show off, right? Like, it becomes almost like Gumroad, right? Like, the idea behind Gumroad was you could sell anything that you created. And so if you created a really cool little icon, you could sell that little icon or whatever, right? I think that's really interesting, and just, I think, reflective of the times we're in. And but I want to, what's interesting right now is you're launching at an interesting time for royalties, right? Because you've got markets that are trying to grab marketplaces that are looking to get market share by eliminating creator royalties or making them optional, right? And so how have you been following that, and sort of how are you going, because royalties are so important to not only you, but then the creators within your community. How are you approaching sort of the royalty situation we're in now?
Sure. Yeah, obviously we've been following it very closely because of how much we um, unequivocally, like, firmly believe that creator royalties should be upheld and enforced, right? Like, it's the biggest promise of Web3 that is exciting for this generation, which is the creation generation, right? It's the promise that in Web3 you can actually monetize beyond that first sale, or whatever it may be. Like, you can apply this in a myriad of different ways. But yeah, we believe in it too, and we think it's one of the things that drew us to Web3, of like, hey, this is a whole new thing. This is a whole new ball game where you don't have to route your way through corporate lawyers to work out a licensing deal, to work out a sponsorship, a direct partnership, or whatever it is, and try to get royalties on the back end of someone who has a legal team.
Right.
That's pretty, like, that's the reality of trying to do anything remotely similar to what happens on blockchain on a very decentralized, democratized kind of way. So all that's to kind of say is, I think, and then this kind of gets to another topic of Web3 gaming versus what is currently Web3 gaming. I think most of the people that are kind of neck deep in this industry are pretty of the similar opinion at this point that, what Web3 gaming is right now is not what Web3 gaming is going to be in, like, even 2 years.
Yeah.
Because the goal of this generation of Web3 games, it's kind of starting right now. You're going to start to see a lot of products from studios that are founded by more traditional background game developers, um, is pulling in people and introducing them to Web3 in a way that's not abrasive. That we're still going to start getting people that are more coming from the gamer perspective and may not even want anything to do with crypto, may not even know what a smart contract is. And I think the future is kind of enabling that and not making it necessary. Like I don't need the people in my ecosystem or the players, the creators, to know what a smart contract is. I just
Yeah.
need them to know what they want to create and to create it and have the tools and the platform to be able to distribute that and market it and sell it and buy it. And so I think really, I guess that kind of circles back around to, I think, the importance of you know the third party marketplaces for that particular audience is going to have a bit less impact and a little bit less importance, because they're not speculative PFP traders, right?
Yeah.
They are people. Usually people come into a game and they're kind of a loyalist in a sense to, like, what are my main games? People might have multiple games, but they usually, if you ask a real, like a daily gamer, what are your main games? They'll be able to tell you. They'll list off, 2 or 3. The really hardcore, maybe they'll list off like 5 or 6. But everyone has, like, these are the games I'm really dedicated to. These are my main games right now. I'm playing Fortnite, Minecraft, and Valorant. Like, those are my main games. Whatever it may be. Those are not my main games.
I was gonna say, you're kind of all over the map on that one, but that's okay.
Yeah. I just picked like the top 3 of a chart. But yeah, those are not my main games. But that's really what it's going to come from, and that's where kind of brand trust kind of falls in. Is like, I trust Fortnite because I'm in this game 24/7. I trust Valorant. A lot of people are kind of Riot gamers at this point. That's an ecosystem that there's kind of a brand trust there, and I think that's what will happen with marketplaces, is that people will be kind of loyal and trust a brand. Let's say it's Eon, and we'll have a marketplace within the Eon ecosystem, and that's where the majority of trade will likely happen, I think, from this newer audience, right? We're not saying that we're gonna like block off third party marketplaces. That's the other great part about Web3, is that you don't have to. You have the choice. You have a choice.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So you want to become more vertically integrated then? So it sounds like you
I
want to
think
at
a
some
lot
point
of
build your own marketplace.
Yeah, I think a lot of games, this is not a new thing to have a marketplace in games. Diablo
Yeah.
has had an in-game, WoW has had in-game, MapleStory has had in-game. It's actually, kind of a hallmark of, games that are very free-to-play, free-to-play capable. Not all these games are free-to-play, but they are all genres that have become free-to-play because of how naturally they can kind of fit in that economy.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about Eon Guardians for a second, right? So tell us about the game, what it's just on the basic, like, what kind of game is it? What can people expect? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, sure. I'll give kind of the elevator version. I guess I'll start with, are you familiar with Monster Hunter?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start there as a kind of a starting place, but use the but it's like Monster Hunter, but free to play and with a competitive aspect, and to kind of dive deeper into that. But hopefully that's enough to get the basic idea. It's an action RPG. There's crafting involved. There's various weapons that'll change how you behave in game. And what your move set is, how you attack, and you'll be fighting gigantic, colossal monsters that are the size of a building or a semi truck. So that's the short version. You team-based action RPG where you can team up with small teams of say 3 to 5, and fight and hunt gigantic monsters. That's what Eon Guardians is, the core gameplay concept.
And what are the blockchain elements of your game?
The blockchain elements of the game is, all the gear that you're acquiring, all the vanity skins, all the kind of character customization traits are NFTs. So, full ownership in marketplace capable. And that's kind of the basic economics is that, we're not a DeFi project, so we're not really focusing super hard into like getting people into a token, and like we want to make this accessible to
Yeah, yeah.
accessibility is the name of the game. We want to make this accessible to gamers and not need them to know anything about crypto, because they really shouldn't.
Well, and the gamer audience doesn't want to. Like, it is such an
They don't want to.
anathema, right? Like right now. So I'm curious. That's a question for you, which is, how are you threading this needle? And I'm curious because personally, it's the same thing that we are doing as we go to market, right? Which is, the world of gamers is much bigger than the world of Web3 enthusiasts, right? So you want to
Yep.
get to them, but you need sort of the early adopters who are sort of into it to to get people like early adopters, for lack of a better term, right? People who
Yep.
understand what NFTs are, enjoy them, enjoy buying them, enjoying collecting them, all those kinds of things, right? But you don't want to veer so far to the NFT crowd that you alienate the game crowd, but you don't want to alienate the NFT crowd as you go
Yeah.
towards getting the game crowd, right?
Yeah.
So
And
how are
it's an
you sort of thinking about that?
interesting. I call this we're the bridge generation of gaming, right? Like in
Yeah,
terms of like everyone that's building right now. So Universe, you guys are in the same boat. Everyone that's building right now, we're the bridge,
yeah,
right? And there's no two ways about it. That is a fact. Um, so on our part, one thing that we're doing is we have a mint on January 9th. That's next week. I think it's like 5 days from now.
yeah.
Um, and we've built up kind of a core community of kind of basically NFT enthusiasts and NFT natives, people who are in the Web3 ecosystem right now. Which everyone in Web3 right now is more or less hardcore compared to a mainstream consumer.
Yeah.
So that's who our community is right now, and we do want to onboard them, and we do think it's important for the early adopters to be acknowleded and built for also, right? Because they were early to Web3, and they're here, right? I think it's important to build for who's here, but also keep an eye towards the future vision, the long-term vision. But what we're doing within the Eon ecosystem is, with our community, we're building a kind of a bite-sized, smaller game experience called Eon Ancients, which is a collectible card game, and we're actually kind of cheekily calling it a community co-created collectible card game, a CCG. But really what that means is, we want to, instead of, for the crowd that is currently right here, and a lot of them are, more NFT native, more DeFi native, more, people who are more used to looking at yield, looking at tokens, right? And they're kind of getting their feet wet in games, right? Like hardcore games, and many of them who are picking up these more traditionally designed Web3 games that are coming out now, it's likely to be their first time really trying to be a hardcore in a game that has core gameplay loops, that has deep game economics, not blockchain, not chain economics. And it's a different thing, right? There's a ramp up, there's an education level of learning, like how do games build intrinsic value, right? Because there's a difference between chain value, where it's kind of measurable. You kind of get these, like, you see the direct A to B, like I can stake for X amount of time, and my APR is this percentage, and it's more financially based value, versus games is very much not traditional financial based value. It's always it's some combination of kind of competitive value, right? How competitive is this in-game item for this season, versus cultural value and kind of rarity in the ecosystem. Like what impact is this specific skin? Is it a meme that some streamer created, or is it just like by some happenstance of, probability, it's become a very rare item just because very few people have obtained it. And and then there's the natural base, like how much did it cost at primary sale, right? But there's most of the value long term in a game for in-game virtual items comes from more of social and competitive aspects. And also kind of engagement and reward, right? Like how many players are here and in this ecosystem and are really engaged in this world, they create the value, right?
Yeah.
Perception from the player base is what drives value. Just as a weird side anecdote, I have a friend that's like pretty hardcore Dota player for many years, and he had a bunch of these like random common items that he had kind of acquired over the year and just ignored and let them stagnate in his Steam account. And he started listing them, and he put them up, and his common items were selling for like 50x the original price, because over the years, even though it is technically what is termed as it's labeled as a common item in game, what's happened socially and what's happened culturally within the ecosystem, and how many people actually acquire that thing that still own it now, and it ended up being that this common item is way more rare than even a like an epic rarity item, just because of actual player behavior and also player perception of value, right? Because that's what
One
matters,
person's
and
trash.
especially exactly, yeah, and that's why marketplaces matter also in terms of like Web3 gaming is players drive value,
Right.
and I think that's a really big concept that is going to be new, or like it's not new, but it's new for a lot of studios to design for
Right.
that idea.
I want to switch topics here real quick and hit on something that you talked about on LinkedIn a couple months ago, where you were talking about using AI art generation for like early concept work. Do you remember that post?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We
So,
actually got a lot more buzz on that than I thought we were going to.
well, because I think that's really interesting. Because the one thing I cannot do that I wish I could is draw. Just can't do it. I've tried.
I'm the same.
I can't do it. I wish I could. I've worked around creative people and just sitting just in awe, going like, wow, you can make a pencil do that. That's amazing. So the idea of using Midjourney or whatever, right, like to create concept art may raise the hackles of some people, but in your case, it sounds like it was an efficient tool. So, so a cost-effective tool for you, because you could get some early concepting done without needing to spend money at that stage that you may not have had. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so from our perspective, and I think I also kind of go into detail and say a lot of these things in the article, but I'll kind of regurgitate. From my perspective, coming from, I also come from a little bit of a film background. Here's
Yeah.
Clone Wars behind me, but I worked on Clone Wars for a number of seasons, and just kind of getting familiar with really rapid concept, right? And that's something that kind of happens a lot faster on an episodic CG production,
Sure.
right? Which is kind of a unique thing. There's not a lot of episodic. I mean, I guess there are now, but I guess the level of attention to detail and kind of the innovation factor for the time that we were doing it in with Clone Wars, I had never seen anything like it, and I had never experienced like kind of a breakneck speed that they were pumping out. Really engaging stories and cinematic level quality episodes. And one thing that kind of happens, for a lot of directors that are non-artistic, which it's kind of a half and half, like not all. Some directors will come from more of a story background and be really amazing, kind of at thinking in terms of editorial and writing, but some come from more of a storyboard background. But you'll get kind of a mix of the two. And really, it's like, how do you most effectively and efficiently go from what is in the creative brain of the director to what goes on screen? And for games, in this early pre-production phase, it's pretty much concept art. You're trying to develop the world without developing the world. Like, yeah. That's where you start for a game, and that's where we were at. And I had just kind of gotten into Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, like right at the point where I was needing to kind of do some of this for Eon Guardians and start developing the world. And I decided there's not a reason that I shouldn't use this. This is a tool that really helps me, because the traditional process, would be you do find, your concept artist, and you kind of sit behind their shoulder and like hour
Right.
by hour tell them, what you do or don't like. Like, I want this dude with a Hawaiian shirt and a visor. No, I don't like that. Put him, give him a baseball cap and put him a polo shirt. Okay, that's cool. Put him on a Vespa. No, I don't like that. Put him on a motorcycle. That's cooler. Make it nighttime. Make it daytime. Let's make it sunset. Put him on a cliff. I don't like the cliff. Put him on the coast. Like, put him in an urban setting.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, that's the journey of creative iteration at an ideation level. That's how this, human brains are kind of stupid, and that's that's how they work. They just like, they do things that cost a lot in terms of artistic effort, right? Each one of
Right.
those things, that's like, that could be, even at a sketch level, that could be an hour of effort each time. And it's not very fun for the artist either. Just imagining, we're kind of coming from the opposite end, but just imagine being on the other end as the
Right.
person who is the pencil, master. Having to just deal with those requests is not super fun.
Yeah. Oh, so you want me to go back to the thing I started originally 24 iterations ago?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of the thing that, it's a perspective that I think kind of gets missed out on in the more kind of social media discussion of the technology of AI art generation. A lot of it is this kind of discourse around, raising, like you said, raising the hackles of like, oh, this is going to take artists' jobs. I don't think it really, I mean, for this particular application, I mean, there's certainly some arguments to be made, across other types of media, but for pre-production in, film or a game, to me, this is a way that I can do 100 iterations of ideation, experimentation. What would it look like if this thing was on fire? What would it look like if this thing was instead made out of skulls? What if it was made out of stone? I can do all of that and do, like, I think I actually did like 100 to 200 iterations of chasing different ideas before I landed on something that was like, okay, this looks like the ballpark of what I have in mind for this world. Let's go and find a concept artist to work with to finish these ideas instead of to start these ideas.
Right. Well, one is sometimes it's economics, right? Like if you have X amount of money and
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Like you just, you know,
It's
so I'm
efficient
curious.
use of your funds. It's like, where do you put like, I could spend all this on the ideation, but that's not what matters. That's not the rate like, the return on investment. It's not super high there.
Right.
Right. I want to put it in like making this thing look awesome at the end.
So tell me, like, what were some of the prompts you would use? I'm just curious from like, you're sitting there, you're going like, I want a mossy world that is iridescently blue, that has 4 moons orbiting it. Or were you going, I want a hulking creature that has mushrooms coming out of the top of its head, but it's kind of a robot? Like, what were the prompts? What were some of the prompts you would give?
So for environmental, like I don't know why, but just like the vocabulary that came out of me for the kind of environment design was weirdly accurate, like right off the get go. I was like, give me like a fjord with post apocalyptic buildings in fantasy landscape, or so. It was something of that nature where it's like I knew I wanted a juxtaposition of like architecture that shouldn't really belong in this landscape in something that was kind of very lush and naturally understandable to us, coming from this earth. We know what a natural geographic landscape looks like, so I wanted to have some grounding and then subvert that familiarity. So that, that's one, but like something that can be a little difficult is actually getting characters, like well-formed characters that are kind of anatomically understandable. That's something that AI can struggle with, especially when you get to monsters, and that's something that I've found, because Eon Guardians is so much focused around conceiving of monsters that are fantastical. AI really struggles with this, so for anyone who's like, AI is going to replace everything, AI really struggles with monsters. And I actually I chased this for a little bit and trying to simulate some of my own AI art models. I did some iterations. I think I tried, over a weekend, I just did like 5,000, like 50,000 iterations of like 5 different models, to be like, okay, let me try to create a monster generator that can take in prompts and make out and spit out monsters. And what I found is, I had to try to start defining what makes something monstrous as perceived by us.
Yeah.
And the answer was, it's not defined by what it is, it's defined by what it's not. A monster is, what makes something monstrous. It's not symmetric. It has anatomy that is surprising. Or it has anatomy that is not where it's supposed to be. How do you tell an AI where things are not supposed to be when machine learning is all about dialing in what is?
Right. Training on things that exist.
Yeah, training on things that are here. But that's not what a monster is. A monster is anything that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah. That's a deep philosophical question.
It's a philosophical question.
You have to train on what's not there.
Yeah. So, I could train it to like make like a Godzilla maker, but then all you'll get is things that dial in on Godzilla.
Right.
And then we're just making Godzillas, which is different than making a thing that can spit out various types of monsters that are just born from people's words. So, that may be something I pick up again someday. It was more of an academic exercise than it was anything else. But that was an interesting thing that I found of like, trying to tiptoe around what are the limitations of AI art generation. I'm sure someone will make it eventually. You train something hard enough, I'm sure you can get there.
Yeah. All right. Well, in our final minutes, I want to focus back. You've got a mint coming up as of today. We're recording this on a Thursday. It's coming up on January 9th. Give me the details of the mint, like where people go, what are they minting, anything you want to share.
Yeah, it's a generative profile pic PFP NFT collection. Pretty small. This is our Genesis kind of first run. It's really meant to be people who are early, right? Engaging people that are early and letting them kind of get their symbol of early support. It's called the Vanguards collection. We're Eon Guardians. Vanguard is the first of of a troop, of a formation, of an army, so to speak. So they're the first, right? They're the early supporters, and it's a small supply, 333, cute crypto numbers. And it's hand-drawn, hand-illustrated characters, avatars from an artist, Tommy Wycinas. She worked with me and my co-founder at a different game studio for a number of years. Talented illustrator, and she did actually all of the character concept art for Eon Guardians. And we tapped her to be like, hey, like we're gonna do an NFT collection. Let's take the style that you've already developed for the Eon Guardians concept art, and let's extrapolate out how to make this a generative PFP collection. It's going to be on Ethereum. You can go to eonguardians.io, and you'll see Vanguard's mint. It's pretty obvious there in the menu. You see it all over the website. It'll be very obvious, and you can learn all about it there. And the mint starts on the 9th, and over the course of next week, it'll eventually open up to the public, I think on like Wednesday. So come and check it out.
Awesome. Chris Huey, you are the co-founder of Superjump Games. If people want to find out more about Superjump or Eon Guardians, I know you just gave the web address, but where can they follow you on Twitter? What's the best way to sort of connect with y'all?
Yeah, Twitter for Eon Guardians is just Eon Guardians. And then for myself, you can find me at Corgi Punk. That's my just Twitter handle. And then they hop on our Discord. We're there every day. We're super active. And that's just Discord /Eon Guardians.
Awesome. Chris, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.